Hello, hello, my beautiful people. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Grady and I am the counselor and transformational coach at Butterfly Project. So today I wanted to talk about healing trauma. And what I mean by trauma is not just big things, but anything that we have in our subconscious mind from our childhood programming. So as you all know, I talk lots about childhood programming and how to reprogram our minds. If you haven't watched some of my videos on that, I will post, maybe one or two up here. But basically in the first 7 to 10 years, especially the first 7 years of our life, this is where we are taking in all the information into our subconscious mind about what we believe about ourselves, about the world, about money, about society, about pretty much everything. And in this first 6 to 7 years, okay, we are operating from theta brain waves. So that's kind of like when you meditate or you're just about to fall asleep, or when you're doing any kind of mundane activities like washing dishes or, taking a shower or going for a drive. Those things put us in that theta brainwave state, which is kind of like the meditative state. And in those first 6 to 7 years, that's the state of our brain that we are in. So we're like sponges. We're just taking it all in, going straight into our subconscious mind. Now, whatever it is that we have experienced during that time, as well as anything else that we might have experienced in our lives, any little thing in the first 6, 7 years, actually 10 years, right? In that time period, any little thing that we might experience that makes us feel bad in any way is considered trauma. Okay. So I know that word kind of seems really big and can be thrown around a lot, but that pretty much, when we talk about childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be some big event. I mean, of course it can be. I know that a lot of people do experience a lot of big, traumas in their childhood, but we could be talking about, something, so small, like your parent is, doing the dishes or, trying to cook dinner and doing all these things, and you want to show them something and they tell you, not right now. You could feel rejected and neglected, and in that moment that could be a trauma, right? Because we're looking through the eyes of a child which doesn't understand the world the same as an adult, right? But then there's other traumas that can occur as we are growing up, as we're in our adult life, and those also can build up in our subconscious mind. When we have any kind of traumas, we do notice in the mind, they've done, studies and, taken, pictures of the mind. And what they've noticed is there will be like clouds kind of covering up, those parts of the brain. So it's not that we forget, those things or we don't have memories of them. Sometimes it's hard to access it, but pretty much that's what's happening in the brain. And so when we do any kind of psychology work to heal, right, because we can change the brain, it's malleable like clay. We can, create new neural pathways in the brain. So there's lots of different, techniques and tools and things that we can do, a lot of therapy to help with the trauma in the brain. Now, here's what I want to talk about today, is trauma that is trapped in the body. So this has nothing to do with psychology. And this is something that's been coming up a lot in my clients' lives, in my, own life, and people surrounding me. And I started doing a lot of research into this. So I am going to do a much more detailed video on this topic, but I kind of just wanted to touch on this to give you a little bit of insight, as well as, some information, tools and techniques and stuff that you can use to be able to help with this. So you might have done a lot of therapy for the brain, the psychology part of, the mental part of healing traumas from your past. The issue is that even if you've healed that, a lot of times you're still not fully healed. And people are wondering, what's going on? Why am I still being triggered? Why do I still have this anxiety coming up? Why do I have all these fears coming up? Why does, my body react to things still? if I'm, healed, when it comes to, mentally, emotionally, right? And so this is because trauma is also trapped in the body, because our cells all have its own brain. And so when we're going through trauma, it's not just in our actual brain, it's also trapped in the brain of each and every one of our cells. So this is where things like, any kind of somatic healing practices like somatic yoga, those kinds of things can help. But also there's something else that's pretty incredible. And this goes back to that first 7 years I'm talking about, us developing those beliefs in our subconscious mind. In those first 6 to 7 years, especially in the first couple years, like the first 2, this is where it is so important for us to create that bonding, right, with our caregiver, our parents. Usually, doesn't have to be, right, but our primary caregiver especially. This is where we are creating bonding. This is where we create oxytocin in the brain. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone, okay? And I'll do another separate video on the whole bonding hormone of oxytocin and all that sort of thing and how it works. But basically in those first 7 years, as we are, building that oxytocin in our brains, will kind of allow us to heal and to deal with, different traumas and things in our lives. If we haven't had the proper oxytocin building in those first couple years, the first 7 years, unfortunately, what happens is we really struggle with that later on in life. And then what happens is we will have a harder time being able to, create and develop and keep and store, that oxytocin bonding hormone that we actually all need for survival. Okay, there was a study done with monkeys, unfortunately, that, kind of talks about this. I have talked about this in another video, I believe, in regards to hugging therapy. And I won't tell the story again here, but because it always makes me really sad. But basically, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, is something that we need just like the air that we breathe. The air that we breathe, the food, that we eat, and water that we need, it is the same. And without it, we can actually, struggle to live. In the study, as we saw, the monkeys died. And so, unfortunately, without oxytocin, we have a really hard time in life. And I'm not saying that, as adults, that's going to happen to us, but we will really struggle in life without the oxytocin. So this is why you always hear, that story about, the guy that goes into the woods and, becomes a hermit and unfortunately, kind of goes mad, goes crazy. This is why. It's by not having that oxytocin bonding hormone. So when people haven't had that in the first couple years, the first 7 years, what happens is later on in life, they'll have a hard time building up the oxytocin unless it's done properly and intentionally. And people like that will tend to gravitate towards dopamine, which gives a similar effect. Dopamine is like, that feel-good hormone. So when you, eat chocolate, things like that. So dopamine, unfortunately, though, is short-lived. So that's why we talk about getting dopamine hits, right? So this is actually what causes people to get addicted to things, because they're getting the dopamine hits, but it's short-lived. So then they need to do the thing again that gets them the dopamine. Oxytocin is long-lasting. It's something that isn't short-lived. It's also something that develops and builds over time. So it's not one of those things like dopamine where you can just get the instant hit and that's it. You kind of have to be consistently doing things to build up the oxytocin hormone in your body and your brain. And absolutely, you very much can. So, and like I said, I'll do a separate video on the whole oxytocin and why and all those kinds of things. But if you want to be able to heal trauma on a physiological level, so in the body, the trauma that's trapped in the body, if you're struggling with that piece of it, work on building oxytocin. So there's several different things that can help with this. Bonding with a pet, right? Especially with dogs, cats as well, but mostly dogs, I think, because they mimic a lot of, human behavior. Cats are really good for, anxiety. It does release oxytocin as well, but dogs seem to be a lot more. And if you're dealing with things like anxiety, which is fear, a lot of times that's having that trapped trauma in your body. So other things can be doing yoga. Doesn't have to be specific, yoga for it, but it can be, and that's super helpful. Doing things like spiritual practices, like meditation, is really helpful. Having deep conversations with someone, so a friend or a partner or a family member, that bonding and talking can really release oxytocin. Hugging, of course, as I said, but it has to be the long hugs. It can't just be, the quick hugs. Those long, really, over 30 seconds kind of hugs, tight hugs, those after about 30 seconds starts to release oxytocin in your body. Having any kind of intimacy, and I'm not just talking about, sex, I'm talking about actual intimacy, right? So not just, doing the physical act, but actually being intimate and bonding with your partner is where the oxytocin can be released. Having any kind of, physical touch, right? Like the non-sexual physical touch, just, affection, that can release oxytocin as well. Getting massages can release oxytocin. So anything that you're kind of bonding, with another human being, or it is that physical touch, right? This is what was done in that study. We do need that physical touch to release the oxytocin hormone, and we need interaction with others, okay? So we're not meant to be isolated. Unfortunately, people do have trauma and suffer from things like anxiety, tend to isolate themselves, and that's actually the opposite of what is needed to be able to heal the trauma. Okay, so like I said, I'll do another video just specifically on oxytocin building and dopamine and all that sort of thing. I just wanted to kind of touch on this to help you out if you are dealing with any kind of trauma. I know January can be a really tough month for a lot of people because a lot of things come up from your past, especially over the holiday season and then the start of a new year. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in, deep into the winter, time. And so that can be very isolating. And then there's, the blues that happens after, the holiday season for a lot of people. So and then, of course, exhaustion from staying up late and too much, festivities and not eating properly and, maybe drinking a little bit more than usual, things like that. So all of this kind of mixes together. And I find that a lot of people, especially in my industry, this is when, I get a lot of people reaching out to me to be able to work with me and heal these things because a lot of stuff comes up. So if you are struggling with any kind of anxiety, any kind of, trauma from the past, things that you thought you healed and it's coming up again, try to do a lot of the oxytocin, building type things, okay, and see how that helps. All right, my loves. So thanks so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to do all the things like this video, comment down below, share my video and my channel with others that you think it would be helpful for. And if you're new here, welcome. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, be part of this ever-growing butterfly community, as well hit the bell icon so you get notified of new videos as I post them. And you guys, truly, I appreciate when you guys do any number of these things or all of these things. It is the best way to help my channel to grow and to get my messages out there. As you all know, that is one of my biggest passions. And what else did I want to say? If you would like to work with me, if you are struggling with anything, or if you want, help to be able to do this, in a more strategic way, my information is always in the description box below. And again, Happy New Year. And as always, I wish you all peace, love, and light. Until next time. Bye-bye.